Roads, as we have already proven throughout the history of this program, are the settings for some of the most terrifying stories people can tell. And today, we will see that. The story we will start with came to me through a mutual friend, and as soon as I heard it, I knew I had to ask permission to share it with you. It takes place on La Rumorosa, one of the most dangerous roads in Mexico, a slope between the mountains full of rock formations between the cities of Tecate and Mexicali in Baja California. Full of extremely sharp curves, difficult to navigate even for experienced drivers, and wind currents that seep through the canyons, which can push cars off the road and down to the bottom of those deep ravines. Anyone who visits the place can stop at one of the multiple rest areas and look down to see the junkyard, or witness to the danger of the place. This road is home to multiple legends of apparitions that have been seen mostly by truck drivers and drivers who pass through the area in the early morning hours. There are even stories of sightings of unidentified flying objects and strange creatures. There is much to be said about this place, and some things may be true or not, but what we are sure of, what I can assure you, is that being there makes you feel surrounded by an energy that is difficult to explain. Let's go then to La Rumorosa in Baja California and start with the following tales of the night. Hello everyone. This story happened several years ago to someone very close to me, practically family, who is dedicated to the transportation of goods, both in trailers and smaller trucks. His life was behind the wheel. The story I'm sharing with you begins on an occasion when he had to carry cargo in one of these medium-sized trucks from Tijuana to the city of Mexicali. It was night, but there wasn't much product to carry, so on this occasion, he wouldn't be going in a caravan with other drivers as he usually did. No, this time, he would have to drive alone. It's a short journey, no big deal to do it. Even crossing La Rumorosa, that dangerous road, before descending into the Laguna Salada desert. It had been a good hour. He left with the last daylight, and at 9:00 p.m., he was passing through that place. Something that was never a good sign then happened. The truck started rattling as it descended the curves of La Rumorosa, and he knew he had to stop before continuing further along the dangerous path. Even with a vehicle in the best condition, he found the rest area to turn off his truck. Upon checking it over, he realized it would be impossible to continue. He wouldn't make it to Mexicali, so he called on the radio to report to his colleagues. They confirmed that a tow truck would be coming out there, but the only one that could handle the truck would take more than 3 hours to arrive. They asked him to wait there and follow the protocol. This consisted of locking himself in the truck and not opening it to anyone for security reasons. Perhaps the cold of that night made it seem more desolate. Perhaps it was that wind that froze the skin when it touched it. There were practically no other vehicles circulating there. According to the protocol, he could not accept help from anyone who stopped to ask if everything was okay. Oh well, he thought. I'll have to wait until they arrive. After a while, he started to get bored. He started to feel sleepy and lay down along the seat, with his head towards the passenger seat. Who knows how long he had been asleep, lulled by the sound of the wind descending between the rocks of that mountain. He woke up when someone knocked on the window. He sat up quickly to see an old lady leaning against it, talking to him. He couldn't see her face clearly. It was very dark out there. The woman kept knocking insistently, and he was on alert. He was a little scared. The first thing he thought of was the many stories he had heard of colleagues being robbed, and of course, this could be a trap. Why was an old woman of that age there, in the middle of the mountain, on a night like that? He told her very seriously, no, that she should go, that he was fine and couldn't open the door for her. That help was on the way. But as he said it, he realized that the woman wasn't right up against the window. She was no longer standing on the truck step. It wasn't a trailer, but the truck was still too high for someone to have been peeking in the window at that height. The woman must have been very, very tall. This started to make him too nervous. The cold started to feel more intense, and the only thing he wanted was for this woman to go away, so he lowered the window slightly so she could hear him, so she could realize he was asking her to leave. He says it was barely a crack, not even a full centimeter. However, the woman, upon seeing this, did not back away. On the contrary, she came closer to put her fingers through the window, through that small crack he had left. The frightened poor driver shrank back, and the next thing, what I'm going to tell you next, he doesn't quite know how to explain. Even today, he doesn't know if it was the terror he felt, if it was just his imagination, but he saw the woman's fingers lengthening like a branch, reaching down to find the door lock. He could only cry in fear, a feeling he had never experienced before. He cried and shrank back to the other end of the truck cab, but without even thinking of getting out and running away. He closed his eyes. He closed his eyes in sheer terror. He heard a truck honking its horn, as they often do when they see a colleague on the road who may need help. But he didn't have the strength to open his eyes and look out, to run towards it and ask the driver to stop. He just kept his eyes closed, hoping it was all a nightmare. He didn't open his eyes until he heard a familiar voice at the window. One of his colleagues was looking in, hours later motioning to him that the tow truck had arrived. He reacted. He came out of that trance. He didn't know how much time had passed. He looked out to see that it was all real. And yes, his colleague was there with the tow truck driver. He hugged them, thanked them for being there, told them something terrible had happened, that a woman, a ghostly old woman, had tried to get in, that she had wanted to take him away. The somewhat incredulous colleagues tried to calm him down, as if deep down they believed it was just a bad dream he had had on that lonely road. They decided to continue on their way to Mexicali, to take the truck. They advanced slowly, so at a rest stop, already in the desert, before reaching Mexicali, they decided to stop for a moment to smoke. There were several truck drivers resting at the place. They greeted them as many were acquaintances. Since the driver was pale when he arrived, the others asked if everything was okay, if he had had an accident or something. He had no choice but to recount what had happened, what he had seen on the road. The other truck drivers fell silent. They looked at each other until one dared to speak.
So, you're the one with the truck that was stopped halfway down? It's just that a while ago a colleague who arrived very frightened was resting here. He stood for a while until he could calm down to continue on his way. He told us that when he was coming down he saw a woman trying to get into a truck stopped at a rest area. A very tall woman who had goat-like legs. The poor guy could only honk and flash his high beams at her. The woman turned to look at him, and he accelerated despite going downhill. He didn't know if she went after him, but he accelerated as if she had. An old man who was here told him it was the witch of La Rumorosa, but we have never seen her.
That poor driver who saw her up close and the rest, tough men who live on the roads, felt very afraid. But it didn't stop them from continuing to travel that route at any hour necessary, even in the early morning hours. Although, yes, always with the utmost caution, and under no circumstances stopping at those rest areas after midnight. Thank you for continuing here. Remember that it is not over, that you cannot consider yourselves survivors of this episode until you finish it, and of course you will. Surely in the dark, or perhaps even better, crossing a road yourself tonight. Where are you listening to this? I hope in the best environment to immerse yourself in these stories. One that could make you the next protagonist of Tales of the Night. For now, it's time to continue with the stories we have for you tonight. And by the way, be very careful when the dead man comes up on you. It may not just be a simple phenomenon of sleep disturbance. Hello, community. I'm still very nervous. What I'm about to recount happened just a couple of hours ago. It's 5 in the morning. I'm awake. I hear my sister getting ready to go to high school. I was about to go out and ask her for help, but in the end, I endured the fear so as not to do so. I'm supposed to be the one who takes care of her. We're alone in the house. My parents went to Puerto Escondido for their first vacation alone. Well, since I can remember. I took a semester off from university due to a mental health issue that has left me very weak over the past 3 months. I needed to rest. Taking advantage of the empty house, my sister invited a friend of hers to stay over the last few days here. Yesterday, they even invited 2 more friends over to watch movies, and I think, without me realizing it, they drank a few beers. Obviously, I didn't say anything to them. I also went through that stage of doing things that weren't the most appropriate for my age, and I wasn't going to be the one to scold her. Besides, I really like her friends. They're not like the ones she had before, who were a bad influence. Here, I suppose, they are the ones following my sister, and she was probably the one who suggested stealing those beers from my dad. She probably hopes that, when I find out, I'll replace them. Yesterday I left early to leave them alone. I was out all morning at a friend's house, and when I got back in the afternoon, I changed to go play basketball at some nearby courts. When I entered, my sister's friends screamed as if I had really scared them. One of them rushed to hide something, and of course, I pretended not to notice. I greeted them from a distance. After talking among themselves, they told me to come over for a moment. I approached to ask them what they needed, but I hadn't finished the sentence when one of them said to me,
"Do you believe in fallen angels? Do you believe in demons that are here?"
I didn't know what to answer. I just told them that I am a believer. Not literally, but I am. I told them that if that exists, they are not here on Earth but on another plane, perhaps in another place far from us, and that it was much better that way.
"Do you want to talk to one?"
said one of them as she uncovered what they had hidden, a Ouija board. I laughed a little. I thought my sister was older and that her friend groups were more mature than to get together, to play with a board, to gather to get scared and tell ghost stories. But well, I laughed condescendingly and asked them if they had already been able to talk to one. One smiled and told me yes. My sister pinched her, asking her to be quiet, and I asked her to please continue. "Tell me, how many devils have you talked to today?"
"Your sister doesn't want me to tell you, but we were trying to play for a good while without results, until that little while ago the board fell. We weren't even playing with it anymore. We weren't even touching it. It fell by itself, as if it had spoken to us to try again. We all thought that one of the others had done it and wanted to play a trick on us. So we started asking questions that none of us could answer, and that's where you come in."
The girl told me, but I didn't understand what she was talking about. I asked her to explain, to tell me where I came into it.
"It's that when we asked how we could know if we were really talking to an entity, we also told it that we didn't want it to tell us our secrets. And then that thing mentioned you. It said your name. It said you were about to arrive. We asked it something that only you could know. And it told us. And then you arrived, right when it had told us you would. That's why we were scared."
Okay. Well, and what did it say about me? What did it tell you that only I could know? I asked them. They turned to look at my sister, who made a face like, "Well, tell him if he wants."
It said that you were going to meet him. It said it saw you sleeping. That you knew, for a long time, that you pretended not to see it. But that you knew it was there at night, in your room.
When they told me that, I laughed. I felt very strange, but I laughed. I told them not to play with those things because then they would end up really getting scared, and I went to my room and heard them continue. They kept playing until my sister shouted for them to stop, now quite upset. That was almost an hour after I had gone into my room. I heard how they wanted to convince me to talk to it, and she refused. But in the end, I came out on my own. I asked them what was going on now. My sister was sitting in the living room, away from the board. She had decided to stop touching it since it started talking about me. The girls were already nervous, but they wanted to ask me if something was true, something that the thing from the board had told them, something that, according to it, would prove that it was there. Trying to conceal their nerves, I approached, sat down between them and asked them to tell me.
He said he's been with you since you were little, that whenever he feels weak, he comes to you, because he knows you're always afraid. And he said that last week you cried a lot one night, when you couldn't sleep, that he was in the chair you have in your room, and from there he was watching you.
Those words terrified me, but I didn't show it. I tried to pretend to laugh, to make them think that it had made my eyes teary and not the fear I was feeling with what they had just told me. I got up and prepared myself something to eat. I tried to hide that my hand was trembling. But it was true. What they told me was true. Last week I had a difficult night with a lot of anxiety, and I started to cry. I didn't make any noise, I just cried a lot in silence. And I'm sure my sister didn't notice because she wasn't even home anymore. Also, what they said about the chair was also true. I have one in the corner of my room that always has clothes on it. No matter how hard I try to clean up, I always end up using it as furniture again, and putting more clothes on it until it becomes a pile. That night, for the first time in a long time, I thought I saw the clothes take on the shape of someone watching me. Since I was a child, I had that feeling when I woke up at night, when I saw the darkest corner of my room. I always felt like there was someone there, watching me. It was a feeling that I worked hard to be able to forget, but now I didn't know what to think. The worst part was the dream I had last night. I saw myself lying in bed. I was on the ceiling, unable to move. I saw something enter the room. Something that looked like a naked man. Reddish colored, almost blackened with horns. I swear, with horns. It looked at my sleeping body. Then it went and sat in the chair in the corner of my room. It threw the clothes that were there on the floor. It sat down, put its feet up on the chair, bent its knees, and hugged them. It started rocking while watching my sleeping body and saying something I couldn't make out. I could only see its mouth moving. I was more afraid than I could bear. A lot. And suddenly it turned. It turned to look at me, floating on the ceiling. It looked straight at me, and I felt like I was falling into my body, like falling off a cliff in the dream. I jumped out of bed and without looking at the corner, I ran out to get to the kitchen. I turned everything on. I thought about waking my sister. But no, I'd better take my computer and start writing. And here I am now, writing. My sister just got up. In a little while she'll go to school. I don't know where they left the Ouija board. I hope they took it away from here, because I'll be alone all morning. Do you know what I'm most afraid of? I have to go to my room. I have to see if the clothes on my chair are lying on the floor. I'm heading there.